Hey guys, welcome to Let's Play It by Ear podcast. I am your host, Joanna, with my co-host, Carrie. And today we are going to be talking about practicing and lessons. So this is in the context of music school. And we will be talking about expectations versus reality. Movement 1. That is what we are calling part 1 of this series, this like mini series within the series. So let's talk myths. Your turn, Carrie.
Me. Myths. Let's see. What did I think music school would be like before applying to music school?
Yeah.
Probably a good place to start. I think, to be very, very honest, I thought it would be a lot of just playing, play all day long.
Yeah.
Not too much like pen and paper work.
Yep.
And that it's going to be smooth sailing, maybe. Maybe that was just a hope. Maybe not so much as a myth, but maybe that was a great hope that I had.
Oh, like was it hyped up for you at all? Like the amount of rehearsals or anything like that?
No, I went into it blind because I was the first one to go into university in my immediate family.
Right.
No one has ever done music before. So I had no clue. I had no idea.
Yeah. Huh. Because for me, it was actually really hyped up. Like the amount of rehearsal time was hyped up. I went to the Vancouver Academy of Music, remember, for orchestra. And so we had, like, at that time, they don't run rehearsals like this anymore. But at the time when I was going, the way that they would do rehearsals would be sectionals every week. So I think it was like every Friday afternoon. We would have sectionals with either just the woodwinds or woodwinds and brass and percussion. And we would, I think our rehearsals were like 2.5 to 3 hours long, something like that. So I recall it being like from 4 something or 5. I think it was like 4:30 to 7:30, something like that. And that we had that every week. And then on the weekend of the actual concert, that would be when our guest conductor would come into town. And so because the guest conductor was only in town for a few days, we would do our 3 or 4 hour rehearsal on the Friday afternoon, Saturday rehearsal all day. So I think it was like, I recall getting there by like 9 or something. You have like a few hours of rehearsal, then you have lunch, and then you have like another like 3 or 4 hours of rehearsal. Like it was actually insane. It was like a work day.
It's a marathon.
Yeah. And then, excuse me, I have something stuck in my throat. But the next day on Sunday was when we would have our concert, and we would rehearse at the Orpheum. The Orpheum, the Orpheum is a venue in Vancouver where a lot of classical groups perform in, and it's an older theater, but it is really beautiful in there. But we would rehearse in there for like I think an hour, because I think that's what we could book it for, and then you would kind of break for lunch or something, and then we would more often than not I think do a matinee concert. So we would do an afternoon concert, and then that was the weekend. So basically the entire weekend was taken up by these rehearsals. So I had the impression that rehearsals was going to be like this, and I had the impression that music school was literally like you're just going to be on the go doing rehearsals all day long, every day, all the time. And so to be completely frank, I did not want that life.
Yeah. Not surprising.
Yeah, I didn't want that life. So that part got hyped up for me a lot. So like that was my myth, actually, that you would have rehearsals like that. It is true that we had a lot of rehearsals, But the truth is that we had more classes and studying than expected, right?
I think that part came as a surprise to me at least.
Yeah, it came as a surprise to me too.
Yeah, I knew you would have to study some, but I mean, to what extent, I wasn't quite sure.
Like how did you end up organizing your time once you found out how much academic work you had to do?
I think that took the whole undergrad
to figure
balance
out.
In a way. I don't think I graduated with a clear thought of how I would have organized myself. If you're asking me now, I don't think I can answer that question.
Well, I mean, so what did you end up doing then to kind of keep? Because, okay, here's the thing, guys. Both of us were sort of seen as the study bugs, you know? Like, we were seen as the two of those people that would academically get really good grades in our classes. I would say that the two of us were seen that way. I certainly felt like I always felt like I had too many things to do. Did you feel that way too?
All the time.
Okay, well then I wasn't crazy.
No. I actually wanted to break away from that mold in a way. I wanted to break, I don't know, for me going into university, I felt like I wanted to reinvent myself in some way and break away from that mold of being a goody two shoes.
Yeah.
But no. It's stuck.
Yeah. I had these agendas, these actual books. So for those of you guys who are old enough, you guys will remember using these before the advent of things like Google Calendar and whatever. And so I had this agenda, and that's where I would write in all of my assignments when they were due. That's how I would keep track of everything. It was extremely messy, but everything was in it. And does it mean that I procrastinate or did not procrastinate? No, it did not mean just because I had it and I could keep track of everything does not mean I was not procrastinating. I procrastinated like heck, partially because I could see the due date in my agenda. So I did constantly feel like I had way too much to do. But I think there's something about the adrenaline of being in music school that for some reason that gets you through. I don't know if you experienced that too.
Yeah, I think so. Actually, thinking back, I probably did something like you. I had, even now, I have an agenda with me that I write down my weekly schedule, what I need to do. Hopefully. Yeah. Do I always get to them? No. Even if I know I need to do them? No. Yeah, it's just about finding ways to keep track of what you need to do when it's due. Things you have coming up and things you need to plan for even.
Yeah. I think so the way that my dad told me to do it was if it's a very quick assignment, because sometimes you're assigned this busy work to do. So he told me to if it's just busy work, he was like, just kind of do it very quickly. It's okay if you only get an 80% on it or something, because in the end, it's not going to count towards your final mark, but you do have to do it, because if you don't do it, you're going to get nothing, right? So he was like, for busy work, just quickly do it and whatever, turn it in. Who cares, right? Don't spend a lot of time. But he was like, for everything else, you kind of need to do it based on when is do the first thing that is due next, right? And so he said to basically do it in that priority. So don't be doing spending a whole bunch of time on something that's due in 3 months if you have something that's due in 2 days, you need to get that thing done first. So that's how I organized, quote unquote, organized my time. But no, I did not feel organized at all.
Yeah. But also to your point, doing the easier work, sort of easier work first. Yeah. But even if you do have projects that are due in a few months' time, don't neglect those. Just do little chunks at a time. Chip away at it bit by bit, and then eventually those will get done.
Did I do that? No, I did not do that.
I tried.
Yeah. I would say you were a lot better at that than me.
I don't know.
Because the only time that I recall chipping away at a project like that was when the little parts of each of the project were actually due as assignments, like Dr. Bob's composition assignment. Quartet. Yeah, the string quartet assignment, which I, by the way, listened to on my channel and reacted to it. And it's awful. It's so terrible. I got a great mark on it, but it's awful. And so that's the only time I recall chipping away at an assignment little by little throughout the semester. But it was because there were literal due dates for every little chip that we did, right? Mm-hmm. So other than that, I never did that. I crammed everything. Don't do what I did. Don't do it. Don't do it. It's awful. But yeah. Mm-hmm. So, what other myths are there? Looking at our list here, there is a myth that so-called not smart people go to music school because apparently music school is for people who are not academic.
What do you say to that?
That is very much a myth. See, what happens is you go into music school and you meet all these professors and they start talking crazy things about theory, music, history, all the, like, they start talking like even just about intonation and talking about how all that stuff, fits together and everything. And if you are not actually in an academic mindset, it's gonna be a lot. Like, it's really not just going there and playing a bunch of music. You're really learning the ins and outs of the hows and the whys, So, yeah. Was there ever a point when you were sitting in class where you're like, wait a second, this is way more academic than I expected?
Probably every day of the first and second year. Especially when we got to musicianship classes, I think. It was like, because I remember I did some of it in high school. I was lucky enough that our band teacher did some of that. So I was able to do quite well in, I think, first term of first year musicianship classes. Second term, it was like, what is happening here? What do I need to listen to? I was like, I am not getting this, and just I actually felt like I am very dumb.
Was it the like chordal progressions that they were trying to explain in musicianship?
I think so.
Was that it? Yeah. I remember that being very difficult. I think the moment for me that I realized things were way more academic than I anticipated them to be was sitting in music history class and listening to the lectures. And I just remember thinking to myself that I might be in over my head, because, we'd be, listening to these excerpts of pieces from like the medieval era and stuff like that. And it, like, to me sounded all the same. And like, I remember sitting there and being like, how am I ever going to differentiate any of these excerpts? And they're going to show up on the exam. I know they're going to show up on the exam. And I just recall being so overwhelmed by just how different it is to study music history. Like, I really was not expecting to write papers on it. I was not expecting to do research. I was not expecting to like sit down and listen to excerpts so that like you can catch some like interesting musical cadence or chords or, some interesting melodic line or some whatever, you know what I mean? Like when you have to sit there and listen to all that stuff. And I remember just being so overwhelmed by it that I basically just did not listen to the excerpts because I like developed this fear of it, because no one really sat us down to explain to us how to study it. We were just taught it, but we were not taught how to study. So
I think I felt that way when it was in third year theory classes.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Especially when it came to all the matrices that we had to do. I don't remember what they're called, I struggle so much with it because I'm not a
It's
math
the
person.
post-tonal theory stuff,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
I was completely lost.
Oh God.
I
You had
tried,
that
but I
same
just felt,
feeling, right?
yeah, I just couldn't wrap my head around it.
Yo, I can't. Oh my gosh. I'm having slight PTSD flashbacks to that myself because I haven't heard of those matrices for a long time.
Well, they're back. They've always been around, I guess. But
I know, but oh my God. Yeah.
So no, music school is not for dumb people. You definitely have to think.
Yeah. And you cannot avoid math. I tried to avoid math.
No.
I tried to, but no. Math is very, very much well and alive in music.
It's built in, I guess.
It really is. So I mean, like if you were to like give someone advice on how to study well for something like matrices and stuff like post-tonal stuff, like what would you have done differently knowing what you know now?
I still don't understand post-tonal matrices.
Well, I mean, besides that, like
Yeah.
how would you go about trying to learn it? Like what would you do differently now than what you did
Well,
then?
if I was in my undergrad now and learning those post-tonal matrices, because of the invention of YouTube, I would probably go and try and look for resources online and just to see how people explain it.
That is
Back then,
good.
I think I was just trying to. I stared at it. I remember I just stared at it and like, come on, I want to understand you.
Oh,
I think I asked some friends for help, but I think a lot of us were just like,
you're right
we're
though.
way over our heads.
You're so right. I mean, there was not really much that you could look up online. We were basically,
Really, yeah.
yeah, we were basically stuck to what was taught in our school and how it was taught by our professors. That was really the only access we had to that information. Whereas I think now there is much more access to this stuff, and it's also taught in different ways. Which, for example, one of the examples that I like to give is there's actually an open source music theory textbook online. It is called openmusictheory.com, and it is called open source because that's taking it from like an open source code where programmers can just kind of come in and offer their own corrections and improvements and stuff like that. So this open source music theory textbook online is contributed to by a bunch of music theorists and musicians, and these are professionals in the field. And so I've actually watched this textbook get better and better and better over the years. Seriously, if that thing was around when we were in school, oh my gosh, I feel like I would have had such a better time.
Yeah. Also, what you said about like people teach it differently, because and now that we have a lot of resources online, you can access how different people understand it in different ways.
Yeah.
And if they happen to understand it in a way that you understand it or you learn, that might help rather than just relying on what the professor is saying in class or how your classmates are explaining it to you.
Yeah, because it really like, man, you brought us such a good point because like we didn't have that kind of access back then. Therefore, we were actually bound to like basically one perspective.
Little bit, but I think it was mainly like library or go to office hours.
Yeah, exactly. And like we weren't exactly very much guided on how to look for things in the library too. You know, keyword searching and stuff like that definitely was not really talked about at that time.
Yeah.
I would say that now people are it's more intuitive for people now, I think, to keyword search because, you know, everyone Googles everything, right?
Yeah.
So people just kind of intuitively know how to keyword search. But back then, we didn't really do that. You know, at that time, I was like not actually even like, I hadn't started my YouTube channel yet. The way that you found people on YouTube was actually just through like whatever was on the front page of YouTube, you know, It wasn't like, the people these days will just pop in search words, but back then we did not do that. It was basically whatever showed up on the front page. That's what you clicked. You were just so used to being spoon-fed information, So yeah, guys, if you're listening and you're going to music school now, use the internet. Use the internet.
Information at your fingertips.
Oh my gosh. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Man. All right. Ooh, this is a very good myth. I will graduate and feel like I know everything.
Because you will.
What happened with you, Carrie?
Yeah, I graduated and then I felt like, oh, I'm not quite sure what I learned or if I learned anything at all. Mm-hmm. Because it's just, like you said, every day, more or less, it is go, 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 go.
Yep.
You don't really have that downtime to sit and reflect and think about, oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Oh, and have those, light bulb moments. Yep. I mean, yes, they were 4 really good years.
Yeah.
Playing wise, I know we both improved a lot.
Definitely.
Academically, we gained a lot of knowledge. Mm-hmm. But yeah, graduating feeling like you know everything and that you're an expert performer, no.
I think it's more like the more you know you don't know.
Yeah.
And I was under the impression that music school would fill in all of my gaps of knowledge. So this could be gaps in repertoire, gaps in just knowledge of music history, music theory. But the thing is, 4 years is not long enough to fill in those gaps. Even a lifetime is not long enough to fill in those gaps. And no one ever really said that to me. Mm-hmm. To you too, right?
Yeah, no. I think it's only through going through university that you learn. You keep on learning throughout life. Mm-hmm. You never really stop learning.
No, you don't. And I think if people knew that, it's more like when you go to music school, it's more like opening up a can of worms, and that can of worms is what you're going to deal with for the rest of your life. You know what I mean? But I think people think that music school is sort of like it signifies that you are a professional and therefore you know everything. But that is not the case.
It is not.
No, it is not the case. It's more of a starting point, if that makes sense. It's more like just because you went to music school, it does not mean that you know everything, but it's more that you know how to learn about pretty much anything you want to learn about, right?
That's a very good way of putting it, I think.
Yeah.
You graduate feeling like you're equipped with the tools.
Yes.
To become a better learner, if you will.
Yeah.
Throughout life. Mm-hmm. And you know how to vet out, I guess, facts from fake news.
Yes. The word that my mom likes to use is discernment, right? Yeah. And critical thinking, right? Mm-hmm. So music school will give you tools. It may not give you all the answers. In fact, it won't. It straight up will not give you all the answers, right?
You'll end up with a lot more questions probably. And it's a good thing too, because music school can be a guide for you. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm curious, I know what questions I had after school, but what questions did you have after school? What gaps of knowledge, things that you felt like school didn't fill in for you?
I think my questions were more how can I become a better performer? How can I a better performer, I think, in terms of mentally and emotionally.
Oh.
How do I stop beating myself up? I think those were the biggest questions that I had.
Well, I mean, this very nicely goes into another point that we were going to talk about in here, which is practicing and how practicing works. So, and that's really when we beat ourselves up, right? Is in the practice room.
Yeah. Well, before we get to that, actually, let me ask you.
Yeah.
So, when you apply to music school, there are oftentimes different streams you can apply to,
Oh, yeah.
like general studies, performance major. What's your story?
So, I think we need to set up the context of our school, UBC, University of British Columbia in Vancouver, Canada, for our listeners. And so the way that it works in our school, at least at that time, we don't know if it works that way now because we've been out of school for a while. But at the time, there were basically, wasn't it like 4 streams that you can go in? Because you can go in general studies, performance major in the instrument of your choice. You could go into music education, and you could go into composition. Wasn't that the 4 streams?
Yes.
Yeah, I think those are the 4 streams. Now, from what I understand, there are many schools out there that don't have that general studies stream. So anyway, I auditioned in for performance major. And I thought that because you clicked performance major, that when you auditioned, you would automatically get into a performance major, because I was like, well, that's the one I clicked, right? But then I found out after I was accepted into music school, I basically found out by looking online at my status that I had gotten in for general studies. And I was like, what? What's going on? So we asked around a bit, we as in my parents and I, mostly my mom, because my mom was wondering about this too. We asked around, and then we were told that basically by, I believe it was by the advisor, the course advisor. So we were told by the course advisor that, it means most likely this means that you did not get into the performance major. So your audition was not successful in getting to the performance major, but it was successful in getting into the school. So basically the next best, stream for you is general studies. And I was like, oh, well, then how do I get into performance major? And they were like, well, you have to audition again at the end of first year. So yeah, that was a big myth. I thought that if you just kind of clicked it, and if you got into the school, that you would get into the performance major, but that is not always how it works. So you really should do more research than I did and actually learn how it actually works in the school. I definitely did not do enough research. I did not ask enough questions. And so that part was very confusing to me. Whereas I feel like if I had known about that before, one, I probably would have worked harder to actually get into the performance major from the beginning. And, because really I took it for granted. That's the thing, right? So that's how that happened. And then it took me, I failed the audition again at the end of first year, and then finally passed the audition to get into my performance major at the end of second year. So I basically had to audition 3 times to get into the performance major. But your story is very different.
My story is pretty much the exact opposite. Because I thought I did research, and then I probably discussed it with my mom, and we decided, okay, well, since you are going into music school, hopefully, let's go general studies so you can study more. You can diversify. That's what my parents like to do.
That's great.
They say diversify, have a diversified skill set. So, okay, general studies it was. I applied for it. I got accepted into it. And then I realized, oh, there's a performance major stream. I want to do that instead.
It's so opposite of me. It's so funny.
This was my myth. This is the myth that I believed. That performance majors are better than general studies. It is not.
Yes, I had this myth too, which was why I auditioned 3 times into it. Yep. And then I found out that wasn't the case.
Yeah, no. Everyone is good.
Yep.
In their own unique way. and each program offers something different. So yeah, I went to the UBC summer music camp the summer before we both started our first year.
Yep.
And that's where I met the band director, and I think we got into a conversation, and I told them that, yes, I would like to eventually audition for performance major. And I was like, okay, well, I think I heard you play during rehearsals, so okay, you're in. I was like, oh, okay. So yeah, my experience was really different from yours.
You essentially did not have to re-audition into
No.
the performance major.
No, and I don't even know how it was changed. I guess maybe I spoke with the advisor afterwards.
You might have had basically a very similar experience to what I had for my master's. So for my master's, I originally auditioned for chamber music performance. Because
that's a stream.
I know, because
Interesting.
So because I basically, well, for those of you who don't know, I actually failed my first master's audition. And so I kind of felt scarred from that experience. So I was like, screw flute performance. I'm going into music, chamber music performance instead, right? So I, according to the portal online, the application portal online, it did allow me to audition and apply for a chamber music performance major for my master's, even though I was a flutist. So I assumed that meant that if they allowed that, then that must mean that they do this, that they allow you to be a chamber music performance major as a flutist, even though their artist in residence was a string quartet. So, so I got in. They really loved me, and I loved them back. They were so kind, and they, the director of the school, basically, he asked me to come in for office hours one day to discuss something very important. So I went in and I was like, what's going on? And he's like, well, here's the thing. You technically did get in for chamber music performance, but here's the thing. We've been having meetings about you, and we realized we can't actually offer that to you. We don't have the resources. We don't have, a wind coach to coach you. All of our wind, lecturers and professors are really only teaching for, that particular instrument performance majors. And I was like, oh, okay, well, what does this mean? He's like, well, do you want to be a master's in flute performance major? And I'm like, okay. And then he changed it, and that was it.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was basically what happened to you for your bachelor's was what happened to me in my master's. Yeah.
Oh, that is interesting.
Apparently they can change it just like that if they feel like it.
Well, yep. I guess don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to tell people what you are looking for.
Yeah, you don't know.
It is your life after all.
Yeah, so I guess that's like an addendum myth of mine, which was that I thought that all this stuff had to be very, very, very official, and it had to go through this very official process. But the fact of the matter is that it's not always how that works.
Yeah, it's not always black and white.
Yeah, it's not.
There are some gray areas.
Yep, and we both experienced that. So
and you learn.
Oh okay. Man, that is crazy. But yeah, I mean, I guess when we both, at least eventually for me, when I joined you in the performance major life, yeah, I very quickly realized there ain't much difference between all the majors.
No, you still have to practice.
Yeah. the status thing doesn't even matter in the end, to be completely honest, you know? No one cares.
No.
Yeah. We all had to study just as hard.
Mm-hmm. And just as many hours practicing.
Quite honestly, there was no difference between being a general studies major and a performance major. There was no difference. It literally was only a difference on paper. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for all of y'all who are thinking that this is a status thing and that it makes you more prestigious to be a performance, no, it doesn't. No one cares. Enjoy your life, you know? Like if you're already in music school, you might as well just enjoy what you learn, you know, to the fullest. Like don't try to climb, you know, for status or, you know, like glory or whatever you want to call it. It's not worth it. Yeah. If I could go back, I would probably tell myself to just not do the performance major audition.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I don't think in the end it was worth it. Because I think I would have gotten into my master's in flute performance in exactly the same way.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I literally think it would have made no difference. Like the only difference that it's making right now is the fact that I can tell you guys.
Pretty much it, I guess.
Maybe I can save someone else the pain, you know? Like, yeah, makes no difference.
Yeah.
So, anyway, we should move on to the next big thing, which is, well, no, we did talk about like organizing your time, right?
We did. But did we talk about organizing our time in terms of how it relates to practicing?
That's true. Let me be the second person to talk about that.
Okay.
You definitely practiced. Yes, you definitely practiced more than I did. So I actually want to hear how you did it.
Okay. I think my biggest difference was because I lived on campus the first 2 years.
Oh,
so there was no way I could practice in the dorm room.
That's true.
So I had to really be on top of my game in signing up for practice room hours. So I did that and I honored them. I was proud that I got the spots that I did. So yeah, whenever it was my turn, I would go in, practice, do my thing, and then come back out.
That's great. That's great. And so you basically signed up for practice hours depending on when you had holes in your schedule, right?
Yeah.
To do so. And
so that would change term by term and year to year as well too.
Like how many hours average did you end up practicing per week? Because you know day by day is kind of up and down, but like over a week, how much would you average?
Over a week, I think average 6 to 8 hours.
That's pretty good. That's more than me.
I think 8 might be pushing it, but maybe I think 6 hours.
6 hours. That's really good.
6 hours.
Yeah. I mean, I know a lot of you guys are like, what? Shouldn't you be doing 6 hours in a day? Well, when you're actually in a music school, you do not have an extra 6 hours lying around to practice. You're in class.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're in class. You're in rehearsals. You don't have that kind of time. So you have to be very efficient with your practicing. All right. Is it my turn?
Go for it.
All right. So I think I need to give people a little bit more context for myself. By the time I had gotten into music school, I had already developed, looking back, I realized I had already developed pretty intense practice anxiety. So it was to the point where if I knew I was supposed to be practicing, I would look at my case, and just looking at my closed case, my closed instrument case, it would cause me to feel very intense anxiety to the point that I would basically just not take the flute out.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really bad. And it continued to be that bad throughout all of university. And no one really knew how to fix it until I got to my master's teacher. And she was the one who started fixing it, but we only had 2 years together. So she just planted some seeds in my head. And then very recently, like within the last 2 years, I've been able to break through. Like present day, we're talking within the last 2 years. So, but you know, I can talk about that later. But at that time, I had very intense practice anxiety. So I would go many days without practicing. And the only playing that I did was in rehearsal. So I technically played quintet music, wind quintet music, way more than my own solo stuff. And I think that's actually the reason why I became known as the chamber music flutist. Right? You remember, right?
You were good at it too.
Yeah, I was the chamber flutist. And it was because I literally practiced chamber music way more than solo. Of course I would be better at it, right?
Yeah.
So that's actually the secret behind it, was practice anxiety. I was much more, like, if I did practice, I tended to practice quintet music. And it was because I did not relate my anxiety with my wind quintet, because we were all so close. And we literally kept each other going to school, you know? We did that, like the camaraderie was tight, you know? So when I went to practice that music, it was very joyful, and it was very like, oh, I really want to figure this out so I can, like, you know, do some cool stuff with my friends, right? And it was that kind of attitude. But when it came to my own personal solo stuff, I had no one to lean on. At least that's how I perceived it, right? Was that I had no one to lean on.
Right.
And so I was like, you know, I'm never going to be good enough to be a soloist. Why bother, right? So I would just not practice. And so I would go, on average, I would wait until the day before my lesson. And then on the day before my lesson, I would practice for about an hour to 2 hours. And then maybe cram another half hour before the actual lesson on the day of. And then hope for the best.
Oh, wow.
And I did this every week.
Okay.
And you can see how doing that every week will exacerbate the practice anxiety. It will basically just completely snowball out of control. The weirdest thing was that I was a fairly good sight reader. So I could make my teacher feel like I was just good enough to skate by. Was I doing her a service? No, not at all, because I wasn't communicating very well with her. So I completely take the responsibility of that. You know, looking back, I'm like, that was 100% me. I was not communicating that I was feeling that kind of anxiety. I don't think she ever knew. And like, that sucks. It sucks that she never knew, you know? I really should have told her, you know? So here's my advice for you guys. Going to music school, one, will not solve your practice anxiety. I thought it kind of would, because my idea was, like, I already had practice anxiety even before going into music school, right? So I thought that being surrounded by music students would compel me to also practice because everyone else was practicing. When in reality, what ended up happening was that I would hear all this stuff around me in the like practice rooms, because you can hear other people practicing, and it would just paralyze me. So even if I had my flute out, I wasn't playing it.
That's really tough for someone so young.
Yeah, I was 17, 18
Yeah.
when I got in. So when we both got in, we were both around the same age. So, yeah, it was really tough. So I basically hid the fact that I wasn't really practicing. The only time that I really like practiced, and like my teacher never told me to do this, but I knew I had to, was the 2 weeks before recitals. So the 2 weeks before the solo recitals, what I would do is every evening at about 9 or 10 p.m., because I had the luxury of practicing at home because I lived with my parents. So at the end of a long day, I would just go through all of my music in one shot. And I did that every day for 2 weeks before the recital. And what that ended up doing was I was basically training myself like an athlete, right? So I was like, okay, I'm going to bomb it the first time, but it doesn't matter. I just have to keep doing this until this is completely normal to me. And then by the time the recital came around, that's why I could pull it off.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that.
Yeah.
And
But
I thought, oh, wow.
But like, why did I have to do that? Was because I never practiced regularly other than those 2 weeks before recitals. Those are the only times that I would practice regularly.
Right.
Yeah. And even then, that's not really practicing. You're training for a marathon. That's actually what you're doing. And training for basically a flute marathon is very different from like regular practicing, where you're like exploring concepts and exploring yourself and exploring your self-awareness and stuff like that. You're not dealing with any of that kind of stuff when you're training.
Yeah.
You know? So there was no flute self-awareness. There was none. Like, there was a bit when other people were involved. So, for example, I would stare at our flute friends' hands and stuff, and that's how I found out that I needed, you know, an extra gadget on my flute to help me hold the flute better and stuff like that. But that was always when I was with other people, right? So, like, for me, I only ever learned anything if I was with other people. If I was left to my own devices, nothing. Couldn't do it. Was just paralyzed. So, now, music school won't solve your problems, but therapy might. I probably would have benefited from going to a therapist. So that's what I would have done differently back then, is I would have sought out professional mental health advice and expertise in the form of a therapist to help me with that. Yeah. Yeah. That's what I would have done. But yeah, that's a myth, guys. If you have practice anxiety before music school will not fix it.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the myths that I went in with was you have to practice a lot. And maybe that's why I religiously stuck to my practice room schedule hours. Because like in high school, there were a lot of classmates who play piano. And I hear them saying, oh yeah, my teacher says I need to practice like 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
Like 8 hours a day.
That's a full work day.
Yeah, you go to school, you have homework, and you probably have extracurricular activities after school. Where do those other 8 hours come in? How do you find time in a day?
Exactly.
So yeah, I went in with that mentality, and I felt the pressure of having to constantly practice, because like you said, you hear other people practice, and if you don't practice, for me, I felt that guilt. It wasn't so much practice anxiety, it was like a panicky feeling that I'm falling behind.
You basically had FOMO, fear of missing out.
And yeah, I guess so.
Wow.
I think because from a young age, my parents instilled in me and my brother, like, if you can do it, don't fall behind. Be as good as the other people. You don't have to be the best, but be the best that you can be.
Right.
And
that's a really great, like that's a really great kind of concept to have instilled in you.
Yes, I'd say yes and no.
Right.
Without guidance, it can be dangerous.
It snowballed out of control for you, didn't it?
Maybe just a little bit. Yeah. So
see, what we're learning here, guys, is that both Carrie and I are very damaged people. But even we made it through music school. So if we can do it, you can too.
And that's why we're sharing it with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I felt like I needed to practice a lot. So as time went by, I tried. I think I tried practicing 3 hours, 3.5 hours. It didn't work. I mean, as a wind player as well too, and with a, to me, heavy instrument, bassoon.
Yeah. Like your embouchure must be like shot by the end of that.
Embouchure is actually okay. Maybe a bleeding lip or something.
Isn't
My
that
wrist.
like shot though? Like if your lips are bleeding, isn't that bad?
Yeah, I guess so. But this is what I wanted to say though. Both my wrists actually, instead of getting stronger, I think have gotten weaker. I can feel it.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh no.
I have very weak grip strength. In my master's, I went to, it was a study someone was doing on musicians and their endurance and their physical ability and things like that.
Yeah.
They tested my grip strength. I squeezed as hard as I could. Twice.
Yeah.
They asked me, is that all you got? Can you squeeze hard? I was like, no. I'm
Really?
giving you all I've got.
Really?
Yeah, so I tried strengthening my wrist. I mean, I have pretty thin wrists to begin with, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
That's not an excuse.
Yeah.
But yeah, practicing a lot, it hurt, and I hurt my muscles, I think.
So
I'm not hurt, I'm not damaged, but
right.
it didn't help, like putting in extra long hours. Wow. So I learned eventually that my happy medium is an hour and a half to 2 hours. And I stuck with it. And instead of going through everything that I needed to do, in my mind, I would break things down into little chunks, organize my time around that, practice what needs to be improved immediately first to enable me to play the entire piece, more or less, from start to end. That's how I worked in my practice time.
Oh, man.
So I learned that practicing 8 hours a day, no,
it's not
gonna help.
It's not gonna help, and
That's
it's
me.
not real. That's the thing. It's not real.
At least to me.
Yeah. I wonder if the whole myth about 6 to 8 hours comes from the fact that a lot of our rehearsals are like 3 to 4 hours.
Maybe.
That's where I think the myth comes from, is because, yes, it's true. We do have rehearsals that can last up to 4 hours. And on top, like orchestra rehearsals. But on top of that, you might have 1 hour of chamber music rehearsal that day. You might have 1 hour of a lesson that day. 1 hour plus 1 hour plus 4, 6 hours. Right?
That's misinformation, though, because rehearsals are not practice.
No.
You should not be practicing in rehearsal. That is not a myth.
But I think a lot of people, outside of the music circles, think that rehearsal and practice are the same things. Right?
Actually, yes. I have heard people ask that.
Yeah.
I have heard people say that.
Yeah. But then actually, when we say practice, we mean a solo practice session where you're going hard on your own.
You're drilling down.
Yeah.
On your repertoire.
Yeah. So that's where I think the myth comes from.
I think you're right.
I think that's because the thing is, if you were to be like, oh, I practice 6 hours a day, blah, blah, blah. But like, if you do the math, there's no effing way.
Unless you don't sleep or eat or bathe.
Oh, yeah, which I guess some musicians don't, but like, you should, yeah.
Hey, please. You sit in close proximity to your colleagues.
Yeah, have a little consideration, I think that's where that myth comes from. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
I think so. That makes sense.
Yeah. So, guys. So many practicing myths, actually, around music school. We definitely we definitely went in with those myths, but then they were very quickly dispelled. And it, made us question a lot of things. Because we didn't really hear about very many other people's past experiences with music school, right? There weren't as many, it wasn't as popular to go on forums online to talk to other people about this. People were not vlogging. I started vlogging in 2010. And that was definitely seen as extremely weird and, and a waste of my time. A lot of people definitely saw it that way. But like basically besides us at that time, there's no one that you could go to ask like, what was it like going to music school for you? You know?
I remember having conversations with like friends who are older in the older years. But I mean, by that point it was too late. We were in music school already.
Exactly. Right. Crazy. Well, shall we end off the I was about to say end off the lesson. Oh my gosh, I've been teaching.
Wow.
I've been teaching
all
day. I've been teaching all day, guys. But anyway, let's end off our little episode today by why don't we talk a little bit about like how, like, because we've been talking a lot about myths, right? Let's talk about the actual expectations now. Just very quickly, what are some actual real expectations people can have coming into like how to actually prepare for a lesson, how to actually prepare for rehearsal and stuff like that. So
sounds good.
Yeah. Why don't you go first?
What would you like me to touch on?
Well, maybe like preparing for lessons, because I certainly did not prepare well for lessons. You certainly prepared much better for lessons than I did, so I think you might be the better person to ask.
Oh, this may make its way back to my teacher. Also because I was a little bit scared of him.
Oh.
It's okay if he knows. I'm sure
we all learned that he was actually a very nice, beautiful man.
He is. Yes. He's a wonderful human being. Yeah. Because I was a little bit scared of him. But how did I prepare? Well, I went through my usual routine of practicing like everything that I said before. But then if I had spots that I wasn't too sure about, I would mark those down, make sure to ask him.
So good.
How to not so much like how to play it, but I think at that point it's more like how can I approach this, or in what ways can I approach it so it works for me, works for my fingers, works for my air, embouchure, my setup.
Oh, that's so great.
So like, yeah, asking the teacher to experiment with me.
You know what? That's the dream student. I can say this from the perspective of a teacher, because essentially what you're doing there is you are being proactive, right? So you're being proactive, and I guess this is kind of what we would like to impart to our listeners is if you want to be a good student, you need to be proactive. So you want to look at your music and first off, figure out how best you learn, and definitely learn in whatever that process is for you. But if there are any parts that you are unsure of, or, you know, you don't like how you sound in a certain spot, or you don't like how you're breathing in a certain spot, mark all those spots and proactively ask your teacher in the lesson. That is the dream student, I can tell you, is a student that asks questions.
Yeah. I also remember, on top of asking questions, I would actually suggest repertoire to my teacher. Like, I want to learn this one. I want to play this one for my recital. Which my professor actually said no to some pieces. Not because he didn't think that I couldn't do it, but because maybe my technique wasn't up to that. Well, like I wasn't quite up to par yet, I guess.
Right.
And he didn't want me to hurt myself.
There you go.
That's not to say that he didn't encourage me to work towards it, but it's like hold off on it.
Sometimes that is true. There are some pieces where it can be so hard that you can literally hurt yourself. So like it is like actually injure yourself, like not mentally hurt you. Well, yes, you will mentally hurt yourself, but like I think we're more talking about the physical hurting yourself, because if you don't have the right technique, if you've not developed the right habits and the right technique, you can really injure yourself trying to play a piece that you really should not be playing, right? So he's so sweet.
So he is. So I think the lessons that I learned in my lesson is just don't be afraid to be who you are. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable.
I love that.
You are there to learn.
Mm-hmm.
You're not there to seek perfection, I guess.
Yeah.
Because perfection doesn't exist.
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
Yeah. You are going to end up damaging yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Mentally, emotionally, physically, if you strive for perfection every single time.
Mm-hmm.
I've had to learn that the hard way.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Like, I
give
definitely
yourself
think
room to make error.
exactly. Like, I definitely think that, like, I had that mindset that you just said not to have in music school. And I can be a person saying, having gone through it, I can confirm that it is very damaging. It just continued, that mindset continued to paralyze me even more. So the practice anxiety got even worse and worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And so did I prepare for my lessons? No, I crammed for my lessons. And so I wasn't that proactive student, you know. And I think what I've learned as a teacher now that I would love to impart to everyone is that when you're in music lessons, I think a lot of people think that the teacher should be proactive and be like, here, now you learn this, now you learn this, and oh, here's an etude. This is what you're going to look out for in this etude. This is what's going to happen to you, right? So people think that the teacher is the one that's going to be proactive, but that's not the case. In reality, the best way for music lessons to happen is if the student is proactive and the teacher is more teaching in what I have recently termed reactionary teaching. So it's, you know, sure, like there's etudes that are assigned or, you know, orchestral excerpt, repertoire, whatever is assigned to the student. The best way to learn in music school, like music school caliber music lessons, private lessons, is if the student does their own homework, is proactive about figuring out where they don't know about things, right? And then going to the lesson to ask about these things. And then the teacher can react and be like, here is my wealth of knowledge for you. You know what I mean? So like that is the best way to take lessons and to be prepared for lessons is switch it. Okay. The teacher is not the proactive one. The student is not the reactionary one. It is the opposite. Right. Yeah. So
teacher as a facilitator.
Yes. But really you as the student, you are on your own journey. And it just so happens that your professor is there to kind of push you along and give you a booster. And basically to be your shortcut to figuring things out. Right. But you really have to be the proactive one figuring things out for yourself.
Very, very much so.
Yeah. So
what parting advice do you have for our listeners and viewers?
Parting advice. I would say for me, I think from my own personal experience, if you think that you are experiencing paralyzing practice anxiety, music school and the people within music school may not actually be the people that you want to seek help from. You need to seek help from a mental health professional. I did not do that, and I very much regret it because I feel like I could have saved years of pain. And I also would have had many more hours of actual practicing. How about you?
Yeah. I think my advice would be to love yourself and to trust in the process. Believe that you will have to struggle a little bit. You will have ups and downs, maybe sometimes more downs than ups. But it doesn't mean that you can't play. It doesn't mean that you're a bad musician. You can still do it. Trust in yourself, put in the hard work.
Just trust the process. Just because you can't trust do it now does not mean you can't do it later.
That is coming from me as a former early childhood educator as well too. The process is very important.
Oh, so nice. Well,
heavy episode.
I know it turned into a very heavy episode, didn't it?
A little bit.
But I think it was worth talking about. And I didn't want to sit here pretending I did a great job practicing, because I didn't, you know. And I feel
or that we didn't struggle.
Right.
Or I didn't struggle.
If anything, it felt like more struggle than successes in music school.
Yeah. Many times it will feel that way.
Absolutely. But I think it's worth it. You definitely come out of it. Even though I didn't end up fixing that problem until much later, you do come out of music school better, I think.
I think you can come out stronger.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think that's a good place to end. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so too.
All right. So, well, how do we normally close off this episode again? All right, guys. Thank you for listening. And you can find us on our social media, right? We have Instagram, Twitter. Do we have Twitter? We have Twitter, right?
Yes, we have Twitter.
We have Facebook. We have our website, letsplayitbyear.com. And if you wanted to email us, you can email us. Yeah, you can email us your questions, responses, any stories or experiences you want to share with us. Please email us. And, you know, who knows, maybe in the future we might answer some questions.
Yeah.
Or it might already be answered in some of our next episodes. We don't know.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So, well, thank you all for listening, and we will see you guys and talk to you guys in the next episode.
See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.